When you look at the world today, it can feel, well, pretty chaotic, right? From geopolitical conflicts to states just seeming to fall apart, it feels like we're always on the brink of something. But here's the thing. This isn't a new feeling. For centuries, leaders have been trying to solve the exact same puzzle. How do you build a stable world order? To help us make sense of it all, we're going to use a guide, Henry Kissinger's foundational book, World Order. It really gives us a blueprint to understand not just the past, but our pretty precarious present.
So Kissinger kicks things off by saying that this search for order is more desperate now than ever before. I mean, think about it. Even as we're all more connected than ever, we're threatened by the spread of weapons of mass destruction, the disintegration of entire countries, and technologies that could push conflict way beyond human control. That's the core paradox of our time, and it's exactly what we're here to unpack.
Okay, so we throw this term world order around a lot. But what does it actually mean? Because look, if we can't even define it, we have absolutely no chance of figuring out why our current system feels so fragile.
Well, Kissinger argues it really just boils down to two essential ingredients. Any stable world order at any point in history has relied on this combination. First, you need a set of commonly accepted rules, basically a consensus on what's legitimate. And second, you need a balance of power that stops any one group from getting strong enough to just tear up that rulebook. You should think of this as our toolkit. As we go forward, we're going to use these two keys, rules and power, to unlock how different systems have worked, and more importantly, why they clash.
All right, with our framework of rules and power in hand, let's become historical detectives for a bit. Our first stop is the system that, for better or for worse, became the blueprint for the entire modern world.
So, our journey begins in the total chaos of post-Roman Europe. Just try to imagine a continent that's fractured into this messy, messy patchwork of kingdoms and fiefdoms, all of them desperate for some kind of system that could stop the endless cycle of war. And think about that power struggle. On one side, you had kings and lords who claimed authority over their lands. But on the other, you had the church claiming universal authority over all Christian souls. For centuries, the big idea was to just rebuild a single unified Christian empire like Rome, but that grand dream kept smashing against the hard reality of dozens of rulers who had absolutely no intention of giving up their power. Voltaire's famous jab just perfectly captures the failure of this universal dream. He called the Holy Roman Empire neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. It was supposed to be this great unifier, but in reality, it was just a messy, decentralized patchwork that never, ever lived up to its ambitious name.
The breaking point was the 30 Years' War, a brutal, brutal conflict that devastated Central Europe. By the end of it, everyone was just exhausted. The solution, the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, was incredibly pragmatic. It basically accepted that Europe would be made up of independent, sovereign states, not a single empire. From then on, the state, not religion, became the fundamental building block of European order.
Now, the mechanism they created to manage this new system of states was the balance of power. And the genius of it was its pragmatism. The goal wasn't to enforce some single moral code, but simply to maintain equilibrium. If any one state grew too powerful and threatened to dominate, the others would team up to push back. It was flexible, it was amoral, and it was laser-focused on just one thing: stability.
The British statesman Lord Palmerston summed up this ruthless logic perfectly. We have no eternal allies, and we have no perpetual enemies. Our interests are eternal. In this world, alliances and rivalries were just temporary tools. The only constant was the national interest, and it was pursued through a constantly shifting dance of diplomacy and power.
But this Westphalian idea, this world of legally equal competing states, was a uniquely European solution. And it was not the only vision of order out there, not by a long shot.
This is where it gets really fascinating. To understand today's world, we have to understand the other blueprints for order that have shaped history.
So, let's take the traditional Islamic concept of world order. It's fundamentally different. It wasn't about balancing equal states. Instead, it saw the world as divided into two spheres: the House of Islam, where the faith reigned and peace prevailed, and the House of War, which was destined either through conversion or conquest to eventually join it. The ultimate goal here isn't a stable equilibrium. It's the eventual triumph of a single universal truth.
Now, let's look at the historical Chinese system, another complete departure from the European model. The core principle here wasn't equality, it was hierarchy. At the absolute center was the emperor, the ruler of all under heaven.
And all other kingdoms weren't equals, they were tributaries. And their status depended on how much respect and tribute they paid to the civilized center. Here, power wasn't just about armies, it was deeply cultural and moral. So, we have these very different historical blueprints, right? A European system of equal states, an Islamic vision of universal faith, and a Chinese concept of a single civilized center. So, why does any of this ancient history matter now?
Because these ideas never really went away. They are deeply embedded in the cultural and political DNA of major world powers, and their friction is the engine behind so many of the conflicts that we see today.
This contrast between the American and Chinese worldview is a perfect example. The U.S., a direct heir to that pragmatic European model, tends to treat foreign policy like a checklist. Every problem has a solution we can deliver. But the traditional Chinese approach is way more strategic, seeing every solution as just an entry ticket to a new, more complex problem. You can see how this fundamental difference in thinking isn't just academic, it leads to constant misunderstanding at the negotiating table.
And we see these clashes everywhere. In the Middle East, the very concept of the Westphalian state is challenged by groups with a universalist Islamic vision. Within the United States, foreign policy is constantly swinging between a pragmatic balance of power approach and an idealistic mission to spread its own values. And in Asia, modern states are still navigating the legacy of that ancient hierarchical system.
So here's the bottom line. We don't live in one world. We live in a world where these multiple competing concepts of order are all active at the same time. And Kissinger's ultimate point is that the true test of statesmanship today is navigating this clash, balancing the hard reality of power with the desperate need for a new, shared set of rules that everyone can agree on.
And that leaves us with a critical and frankly pretty unsettling question. Given these deep-rooted historical divides, are we just destined for a future of escalating conflict? A permanent clash of civilizations?
Or is it possible that by understanding these different perspectives, we can begin to construct a new, hybrid world order, one that respects the diversity of these historical visions while establishing a common set of rules and a stable balance of power for the 21st century? Well, that right there is the fundamental challenge of our time.